Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Conservative is Cool Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley. Tonight, we have a special guest in my usual fight against fighting liberals across the country. We have a special guest, the opponent of Barney Frank in Massachusetts, Sean Bielat. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be on tonight.
Thank you. I was doing some research about you on your site, and with your extensive background, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. I'll just give you the quick 30-second bio. I'm a Marine officer. I spent 4 years active duty, 7 years in the Reserve. I'm currently a major. I have a Master in Public Policy from Harvard, an MBA from Wharton, did my undergrad at Georgetown. Spent several years working in the private sector, growing companies, creating jobs, growing wealth for shareholders, both at a consulting firm, McKinsey & Company, and at iRobot, which is a defense technology firm. They make robots that go after roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan. So unlike Barney, what I'm bringing to the table is time in the private sector, again, helping grow the economy, and time in the military, helping to think about the national defense and figure out how to keep our country safe both domestically and abroad.
Well, what would you say some of the biggest core differences are between you and and Barney?
Well, we have a very different philosophy on government, to say the least. Barney, yeah, I'm keeping it civil. I'll let other people fill in the punchlines as I go through. But I believe in a limited government. I believe in the power of free markets. I believe that government should stay out of markets unless they're broken, which most of the time government has a tendency to break them further. I believe in a strong national defense and that the rightful role of the federal government is to provide that defense along with secure borders. Barney Frank believes in social programs and deficit spending, lending to people who can't afford to borrow, to buy homes that they can't afford to make payments on. It's a very different way of looking at the world.
I agree. Do you believe, I noticed that you spent time in the private sector, do you think that plays a big part in why a lot of these big government leaders they spend so recklessly?
Yeah, absolutely. Barney Frank has never worked a day in his life in the private sector. Every paycheck the man has ever had has come from us. I take that back. He worked at Harvard for a year. I don't think that counts as real-life experience. But the result is, he spends 28 years in Congress, and he's divorced from what it takes to run a company, what it takes to make decisions on whether to hire or fire, what it takes to figure out how to succeed in the marketplace. And you look around at the other leadership in the Congress and in the administration, and none of them have experience running a business, running a profit and loss center within a business. And that kind of experience is invaluable if you're going to make decisions that are going to affect the entire economy.
Right. He's the head of the finance committee, and he's been supporting Fannie and Freddie Mae, and Fannie and Freddie. How does he continue to ask for more money when it's hemorrhaging money every quarter?
It's never stopped him before. Why should it stop him now? He doesn't think about government from the perspective of the money belonging to the people. He thinks of government as a entity which is supposed to redistribute wealth, which is supposed to decide who the winners and losers are going to be, and is going to take money from some people to pay for programs for other people. And he doesn't consider the fact that not only is that unfair, but it actually creates dependencies among the people that he's ostensibly trying to help. And
right.
It's problematic in every respect.
Is that one of the motivating factors that made you decide you were going to run?
Yeah, absolutely. I took a look around. In the past year and a half, I haven't liked what I've seen. Like a lot of Americans, I'm concerned about the direction we're headed. I'm concerned about the deficit. I'm concerned about the economy. I'm very unhappy with our foreign policy. I just think we're trending in the wrong direction, and I think government is overstepping its constitutional bounds. I think we've forgotten about the core traditions of our Constitution and what it means to have citizen legislators. And I think we're not just walking away from that stuff, we're running. And I think a lot of us need to step forward and get involved and turn the ship around.
If you were elected, one of the questions I've asked a lot of people running for Congress, would you be in favor of trying to repeal the health care bill?
Absolutely, and if not repeal, defund. It's the wrong bill. It erodes our freedoms and stretches the government into a new realm, which is providing mandates on individuals to buy health care, which is I just don't understand where the Interstate Commerce Clause gives the federal government that role of responsibility. But in addition, it causes more problems with the healthcare market than it solves. What we need is more competition, not less. What we need are fewer taxes, not more. And the healthcare runs the wrong direction in both of those. And it's so complicated, nobody really knows what's in it, and we're not going to find out for the next several years.
Yeah, Pelosi said we have to actually pass it first before we know what's in the bill. Has Barney, has he been willing to do any debates with you at this point?
No.
Or he's not
I'm sure hoping he will.
That?
Yeah, I'm sure hoping he will. Love to get up there on the stage, side by side, and have a real conversation about which way the country ought to be headed, and let people here in the 4th District in Massachusetts decide who they thinks more like them, and I'm pretty sure that's going to come out in our direction.
Do you believe just the time in D.C. has just really made him out of touch with how people are, normal people think, and how we think the country should be ran?
Well, he has been in office since I was 6. I'm 35 years old. He's been around since I was 6. He was elected in the class of 1980. A lot has changed in this country in that time. And during the entire time, he's been in that bubble, that isolated bubble of Washington, D.C., where you sit in the center and you look out towards the periphery, and everything's a little bit distorted because you're sort of in that land of legislation and special interests and everything else that goes on in Washington. So yes, I think his view of the United States, of its problems, of its needs, is very distorted. And he hasn't had to live in the real world in a long time, and I think that's affected him in a bad way. So I am personally giving him the opportunity to retire. I'm just going to help him into his retirement. I think it's a great service to him.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's about time. I'm looking through a lot of the core issues you have here, and one of them obviously is tax reform. Do you support the fair tax?
People have this conversation with me. I myself am a flat tax guy, but there's a lot of good about the fair tax as well. But what I always say when people say, I say I'm a flat tax guy, and if they're fair tax, they say, this and that. And I say, you know what? This is the right discussion we having.
Right.
Let's talk about which type of tax reform, because now we've already agreed we need to overhaul the whole system. How we overhaul it is the right discussion we having. So either way, it's a huge step in the right direction because we're getting away from what we have now, which is an awful system.
Well, what's the difference between the fair tax and the flat tax that you prefer?
Well, the fair tax would be an entirely consumption-based tax. It'd be similar to a national sales tax, and you wouldn't have any other income tax in conjunction with that. The flat tax would simply be everybody pays the same tax rate on income.
Okay.
And there's pluses and minuses to both sides, and I think there's good arguments for each. I used to be a consumption-based tax proponent, and now I switched a little. But again, I would take either of those in a heartbeat over the current system.
Exactly. And you spoke a lot about deficit reduction. Where would you start, and how would you go about doing it?
I think you absolutely, in fact, mathematically, the only way you can get there is by controlling entitlements and starting to make some cuts to entitlement spending. If we don't make any changes by mid-century, by the year 2052, every single tax dollar we bring in will go only to pay for entitlements. There won't be a single dollar left for roads and bridges, for the military, for the judiciary, for any of the other functions of government. So people can say what they want to say, and there's some good points to be made about cutting discretionary spending here or there. Lots of room for cuts, but until we take on entitlements, we just won't get it done. So I think the number one thing is to get us back on sound footing in terms of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid.
Okay, all right. And let's see here. As far as we're dealing with a lot of issues, I know protection of this country is very important to you, obviously. How do you feel with the current administration's treatment of Israel?
Well, I think it's inconsistent. I think it's wrong the way this administration is soft on our adversaries and hard on our allies. I think that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and they're a staunch ally in the war on terror. And I don't know why we would, show them the lack of respect that we have over the past several months. And the administration now is in a position where they don't really know how to respond to the latest events. Because they clearly aren't strong supporters of Israel. At the same time, they understand now that they need to, at least appear to be. So I think they're in a position that they're not comfortable.
Right. And you kind of answered the other question I was going to ask. It seems like we're actually being tougher on Israel than we are to Iran at this point.
Absolutely. Iran is headed rapidly towards becoming a nuclear power. And when it does, they're going to have the power dynamics of the Middle East are going to change substantially, and it's going to be a less stable place. If you have two nuclear powers in the Middle East, one of which, Iran, has publicly stated on many occasions that it thinks the other of which, Israel, doesn't have a right to exist, that's a bad thing. And we're enabling that, or we're allowing that to occur, and I can't understand why we would possibly not put our interest in Iran and stopping their development of a nuclear weapon ahead of some of these other foreign policy issues we're pursuing.
Do you think we're doing enough right now to protect our country, whether it be with border security and the president he's always willing to cut to the defense funds and things of that nature? Do you think we're doing enough right now to protect our country?
No, I don't. I think it would be very difficult for somebody to look at the fact that Border Patrol agents have arrested something like 68,000 people coming across the border of Arizona in the past 6 months. So how many did they not arrest? There's obviously a lot more than those 68,000. So how can that many people be coming in just in that one state and us have any sense that we're controlling our borders? And then you look at ports. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you think the most responsible thing we can do to protect our borders at this time?
Well, I think it's a host of different actions. First of all, you plug the leak in the dam. So you get troops out, you get National Guard out, you get customs and immigration control out. You put people on the border in the very short term because you can do that in a matter of weeks. And I'm not talking 1,200 or 1,400. I'm talking about the number you need to actually do the job. But over the longer term, there's a variety of technologies and approaches which will differ based on the terrain. In some places, a wall may work well. In other places, electronic surveillance may be a good alternative. But in any case, these solutions aren't rocket science. Right. All they require is the political will to implement them.
Gotcha. Do you agree with the governor of Arizona and the decisions they had to make?
Well, I'll tell you what. I live up here in Massachusetts, and I hear all these people talk on the news in New York and Washington and Massachusetts and San Francisco saying, oh, we're going to boycott these people, blah, blah, blah. Well, you tell me why 60 to 80% of the people who live in the state are in favor. Right. Clearly, there's something going on in that state that needs fixing. And where has the federal government been in ensuring that the borders are secure? If the federal government was playing its role, Arizona wouldn't have had to pass any legislation. So, I think really what we need to do is get those borders under control, have people start focusing on what's going on in their own states and in the Congress, and stop worrying about what laws other states are passing to protect their own interests.
Exactly. Let's see here. And as far as like you said, if the government steps up their half, what would you do as a congressperson? What would be some of the first things that you would work on to try to, again, kind of make this country a safer place to be?
Well, so one is what I talked about getting actual infrastructure in place to secure the borders, walls, and electronic surveillance, and what the other things you need. There was in 2006, there was an initiative called the Strategic Border Initiative, and it was a several billion-dollar effort to secure the borders, and it really kind of fizzled. The contracting was done poorly, and some of the technology didn't work out, et cetera, et cetera. But some of it did work, and that could be a foundation. and you could use that as a starting point. In addition, though, we need to really do something about port security. Right now, we have all these container ships coming in with tens of thousands of containers, and something like 2% of them are scanned. So they could have human trafficking, they could have drugs, they could have arms, they could have WMD in them, and that's another real area of concern. So getting funding for the programs to secure the borders and to secure the ports, and a good pool of funds for that would probably be out of the benefits that we know we're paying out to people who are currently in an illegal status.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry about that. Hey, you actually have a caller right now that's calling in. Would you like to take a call real quick, Sean? Somebody
Absolutely.
else might have an interesting question for you.
Okay.
All right, hold on. Catch this caller here. Caller, you're on the air.
My friend Linda went out with a show.
All right, never mind. Okay, anyway. And so I'm looking at, you're also, through your core issues, you're also someone that believes in the Second Amendment.
That's right.
Okay. Do you have a lot of issues in Massachusetts with the gun control problems out there?
Well, you know Massachusetts. If there's something that can be regulated, and then you can put some regulation on that regulation, this state will do it. So yeah, I've lived in a number of different states, in Virginia and California, and while I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed in different places. And I'm not an expert on gun laws, but I can tell you here in Massachusetts, you sure do have to go through a lot to get a permit. Yeah, so you know it's silly stuff. I mean, come on, if I've served in the Marine Corps, in order to attain the title of Marine, I have to have demonstrated that I can proficiently use a rifle and as an officer a pistol. I've demonstrated that I can do that safely, et cetera, et cetera. Why then should the state of Massachusetts require that I complete a 6 or an 8 hour course? You know, at a minimum, couldn't you provide some credit to somebody who's been in the military? You know, there's a bunch of common sense solutions. Even if this state says, hey, we really want to regulate who gets permits and stuff, let's at least use a little bit of common sense here.
Gotcha. And as far as education, that's something that's near and dear to me. Are you a proponent of schools of choice, voucher programs, or anything of that nature? Absolutely.
Anytime you introduce competition, it's a good thing. First of all, I oppose teachers' unions and any effort to reduce merit pay and performance-based promotion and pay. My mom is a high school English teacher, and she taught for a number of years, 15 years or something, in the public schools, and she finally left because she couldn't stand the unions and everything that they would do to keep people safe in their positions, even when they weren't performing. And so she left, and she went to a Catholic high school, and she probably gets 60% of the pay she was getting before, maybe half. The benefits are less, but she's much happier because at least when she does a good job, she's rewarded for that. At least, the students are there by choice. And that's the second part, which is what you just mentioned, the portable funding, the vouchers. Where it's been tried in D.C., it's been a huge success. Right. And parents have voted with their feet. They've said, you know what, I want my kids to go to the best schools they can, and they send them to those schools. And so the Democrats, who spend a lot of time talking about how they want to help people, they want to help people who are in tough situations, one of the first things they do when Obama comes to office is stop the funding for that program.
Right.
Why wouldn't we want people to be able to make their own decisions about where their kids go to school?
You think it's just the issue now? And I've wondered this myself. Obama said he did not want to look out for special interest groups. Have his unions and the teachers' unions and those sort of people become the special interest groups that he's looking out for?
Oh, absolutely. A good example is this. In this country right now, the unions are in decline in terms of the number of members and the number of people joining, except in the government, where the pace of growth is sufficient to enable the unions as a whole to remain constant. So what we've got is a situation where more and more people, government employees, are going into unions. Now, if the union's role is to protect the worker against the quote-unquote man, right, and in the case of a government employee, we are the boss, then aren't unions essentially protecting government employees from us?
Working against the taxpayer.
Exactly. And what sense does that make? What we need is government employees who are more responsive, who are more subject to meritorious promotion or dismissal, who get less in benefits. Right now, the median salary in this country is something like $38,000, and in the government it's $66,000. What's wrong with that picture?
The government should not be giving out the best jobs. That's for sure.
That's definitely for sure.
Well, can you give everyone your website so they can go check that out and help support your campaign? Because a lot of people, I think they don't realize, I think after the health care bill passed, that regardless if you're running in your state or another state, it's very important to support conservative candidates throughout the country, because it still ends up affecting us all when we have people that are far left that are in our Congress.
That's right, and we really need people to start making some changes. But my website is retirebarney.com. Try to make it easy for people, so if you just go to retirebarney.com, it'll send you to my site, and we need contributions, frankly. It's going to be an expensive race. Barney Frank can raise as much money as he wants, whenever he wants, and we don't need to match him dollar for dollar because we've got a much stronger organization on the ground, but we need to be competitive. So barneyfrank.com, you can get information about positions and policies and the rest of it. You can get in touch with us, and you can make contributions if you're interested in doing that.
All right. That's retirebarneyfrank.com?
No, just retirebarney.com.
Retirebarney.com. Hey, look, that caller called back in, Sean. I'm gonna see if we can take this call here one more time. Somebody must really want to talk to you here.
Okay, great.
Caller, you're on the air. Hello, caller. All right. Well, we're just having technical difficulties. Well, Sean, I want to thank you again.
Hopefully
for
she can visit us on retirebarney.com.
Definitely. That's what they need to do. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you tell me one other thing? How's the campaign trail been? I mean, I know this is the first time doing this for you. How have you enjoyed that so far?
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. You wouldn't believe how many people have been waiting a while to get a voice. A lot of them are lifetime Democrats, but they're not happy with what's going on. They want to have a voice for them in Congress, and they just want to be heard. And it's been a lot of fun. You learn a lot by talking to so many people and learning about their problems, learning about their businesses, learning about their opportunities. And it's been really great.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming on a personal note. As a man with 2 daughters, I want to congratulate you on your son that's going to be born soon.
Thank you very much.
Lucky you.
Yeah, we're very excited.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, and good luck on this campaign, and hopefully we can have you back on again and follow you up till you get to Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Thanks for having me on.
All right. God bless you, and good night.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye. Caller, you're on the air. All right, well, we keep having calls from somebody. Caller, you're on the air. All right, I'm not taking that call anymore this evening. Well, that conversation right there was with Sean Bielat. He is running for Congress in Massachusetts against Barney Frank, so we got to help him retire Barney. And I'm hoping that we can get active and help him out in this campaign, folks. Again, this is all about putting conservative-minded individuals in the positions so we're not left in the situation we were in this year with people with no morals and no backbone. There will be some tough decisions that have to be made if we want to get this country in the right shape. And Sean seems like he has some very good ideas, and I hope that we can help him get to D.C. So if you can, go to the website, retirebarney.com, and look and see what you can do to help support Sean in his campaign going on. Again, we talked about a few issues, and I just want to talk about a few things before I play the Tim Phillips interview from Americans for Prosperity. We have to really look at what's going on right now in our country. For some reason, we have an administration that seems to be willing to criticize and not support Israel, but yet at the same time show themselves to be weak and passive when it comes to Iran. So it's really important, right? These are some trying times right now, and we really need our leadership to step up and recognize who our allies are and who our enemies are. Every day, Iran is getting closer to building a nuclear missile that they hope, at the very least, can get to Israel, and their bigger dreams and aspirations are to get to America. So I'm hoping that the president and the current administration will wake up, look around and see what's going on. We've had multiple unsuccessful attacks, thank God, in America over the last couple months, and they're not backing down. So there's really no need for us to back down. A lot of other issues going on. I'm seeing that the president is slowly but surely trying to continue to, he was taking some responsibilities for this oil spill, but I have news, people. I cannot blame this on the president. I think his reaction time and that sort of thing is where he's going to catch criticism, and some of that's rightfully so. But realistically, BP is the company and the party responsible for this disaster, this ecological disaster, and they need to step up and do the things they need to do to get this done. The president himself, people were wanting him to go out in the water, and there really is nothing he can do but look at it just like me and you can. BP has really got to step up their efforts. Obviously a lot of the liberals are going to be crying about the damage that's being done, and another reason why we cannot continue to drill. But actually what we're hoping is that maybe you can find better places to drill, but we cannot be relying still on foreign oil. It's a security issue, and I think at some point we really do need to look at all the options for alternative energy. But for people that want to blame this strictly on the president, I say you're kind of off on that, because he's not going to be the person that's going to get that oil out that water. He should just be putting the heat on BP and not giving up on that. Now, if he needs to be down there making himself more present for that to happen, then so be it. But the bureaucrats and the people that have been in bed with this oil industry for so long, now you have people quitting and resigning from their jobs. But this has quite simply been going on for a very long time. And I personally can't understand why it took them 3 weeks to implement a top kill system, when that really probably should have been the first thing they were trying to do. And it just seems like they were showing different accidents and oil spills in the last 20 to 30 years, and it just doesn't seem like that they have taken the time out to do the research and have the proper things in place for emergency scenarios. So a lot of the blame needs to be put on BP and the oil industry as a whole, because quite simply they've owned all of our politicians, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, and they have not had to hold their feet to the fire, except in a situation like this where you have a terrible accident that brings their issues to the forefront. So I hope that our government can monitor this situation, but this is truly something that BP needs to rectify, and rectify quickly. I don't like the fact that there's all these caps on what they can be sued, because there's going to be just people, untold amounts of loss of money, communities, resort communities that are losing money because of this disaster. So people that are quick to blame the president on this one, I'm going to actually give them a slight pass on that and say that this is more of a private sector issue. We can't pick and choose when we want things to be private sector and we want things to be government. The only thing that I would ask the president not to do is give us so much lip service, and actually get involved and roll his sleeves up like everybody else and get something and come help these guys, push these companies to come up with a plan to get this situation taken care of. Outside of that, there's really nothing the president can do. So moving on, I'm going to replay an interview that I did last week with Tim Phillips, who is the president for Americans for Prosperity. We talked a lot about government reform and the things we need to do to get this country in a better position and a more successful future. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play the Tim Phillips interview. This is Conservatives Cool Talk Radio, your host, Wayne Bradley. Thank you for listening in, and I'm going to go ahead and play the Tim Phillips interview now. Thank you for joining me today on Conservatives Cool Talk Radio. This is your host, Wayne Bradley, And today I have a very special guest in the office today. It's Tim Phillips. He is the president of Americans for Prosperity. Mr. Phillips, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
All right. I was doing some research on the website, and I'm a member of Americans for Prosperity, and I just want to know right now, first, can you just give us some background of yourself, and then kind of give us a little background information about the organization?
I was a campaign political worker and operative for many years in the private sector, and I always felt that if we elected enough Republicans, that would probably solve all the problems in the world. and in all candor, I was wrong. I mean, I think they do some things well, but in the end, I decided that we really need a conservative movement, specifically in our case with Americans for Prosperity, a free market group that will have troops and activists who will fight for our economic freedoms, and specifically will hold political leaders in both parties, Democrat and Republican, accountable on spending, taxes, growth of government. Because in the early 2000s, we saw Republicans absolutely lose their way on spending, and now we're seeing Democrats who are literally bankrupting our country if we don't stop their spending efforts. So that's kind of what Americans for Prosperity is about. It's about building a grassroots organization across this country that will hold these elected leaders at the federal, state, and local level accountable when it comes to spending too much money, taxing too much, and pushing policies that hurt our economic freedoms.
Exactly. And for someone who might want to become a member or wants to get involved with Americans for Prosperity, how much does it cost to become a member, and what do they need to do to get enrolled?
We ask folks to become activists, people who take action to defend their economic freedoms, whether it's emailing a member of Congress or coming out to one of the rallies or efforts we do around the country. There's no charge. We just ask them to go to Americans4prosperity.org, Americans4prosperity.org. There's easy sign-up information there. It tells you all about the organization. And the most important thing, we want to raise money. Of course, we have to pay the expense of keeping this operation really going and making a difference. But we urge people, get active first. Give up your time and take the effort to come out to these rallies. You'll see on the website they're detailed on key issues in key states. Make a difference with your time first.
Okay. And what's the website address for people so they can go check that out?
Americans4prosperity.org. Americans4prosperity.org. And we'd love to have folks come in there. You can pull up what's happening in your state. There are state links as well as national links to the key issues we're working on, like cap and trade and the spending issues, et cetera.
And what do you think for the typical American that's sitting at home right now that might be listening to this, what do you think their biggest concern should be with the way this country is headed and the way our government is leading us?
The sheer growth of government, both in regulation and spending, because their spending and their over-regulation literally is killing the long-term economic health and opportunity for every American. And we look at Greece, a country that is literally bankrupt.
Right.
And it's bankrupt because it has a government that is so big that the private sector, there's no way they can support it. And we don't want that to happen in America. We have $1.5 trillion this budget year, in budget deficits in America. We have a government that is growing, adding jobs by the tens of thousands. Those are jobs that cannot be sustained because they're being paid for using taxpayer dollars that don't exist at this point. And we have brand new entitlements that are piling up, whether it's the health care takeover we just saw that's going to spend another $1 trillion
right.
In the near future. And so that is the biggest challenge facing our country. There are individual issues. The health care takeover is a big one. We've got to turn around. Cap and trade is a big one, card check. But the biggest overall threat, and one that all three of these issues fall into, are politicians that want government to be ever bigger, ever more powerful. And that chokes off freedom, it chokes off opportunity, it kills jobs, and in the end it piles up taxes and debt, and it's going to bankrupt our country if we don't stop them.
Right. Now, would you agree that, theoretically most people believe that's been a thing with Democrats, but like you were saying before, have the Republicans kind of gotten a little bit headstrong and trying to make government bigger, and are we finally maybe righting the ship with some of the new candidates that are coming in?
Listen, absolutely. I've had sometimes reporters or people on the left say, "Oh, aren't you guys just a front group always attacking Democrats?" Nothing could be further from the truth. The very first national issue that Americans for Prosperity took on was 2006, and it was earmarks. Those pork barrel projects that all the politicians or most of them support.
Right.
And we went to the site of the 50 biggest earmarks in the country, in our view, the 50 worst ones. And over half of them were in Republican districts because Republicans were in power then.
Right.
And they were spending too much money too. So we've taken on Republicans when they've done the wrong thing. Right now, it is more Democrat because Democrats control the House, Democrats control the Senate. We have a Democrat president, and all three of those institutions are spending money that we don't have on projects that are too big, too grasping, too big on the red tape and regulation. And so we have more of a beef right now, if you will, with Democrats because they're in power.
Right.
But I think we need a healthy, strong, vibrant, grassroots conservative movement like Americans for Prosperity, like the Tea Parties, to hold both parties accountable. Absolutely.
Right. Now, how did you feel? I know that was one of the president's biggest promises, that he wouldn't make bills with earmarks and things of that nature. And that was like one of the very first things he did was with the spending bill, suggested and put a lot more earmarks in there. How do you feel when politicians pretty much just lie to us boldly about things like that?
A lot of Americans voted for Barack Obama genuinely thinking he was a different kind of politician.
Right.
That he wasn't, as he said, he wasn't red state, he wasn't blue state, he was for America. He wasn't just another big spending Democrat, he wasn't just a partisan politician. Unfortunately, his deeds have not matched up to that rhetoric. The earmark example where he's signed bill after bill with literally tens of thousands of these pork barrel earmarks. He promised that lobbyists would not be able to serve in his administration. Then he turned around and gave waivers to dozens of big, high-powered Washington lobbyists to be in the administration. He promised he wasn't going to spend money hand over fist, and he's given us the biggest budget deficits back-to-back in our nation's history in real dollars. So it's really frustrating and disappointing, but he has governed as just another big spending liberal.
Do you think the media is pretty much giving him a pass for these broken promises that he's, that I heard with my own ears, essentially?
Some of the media have, no doubt about that. They don't really report what we're talking about. But I do think that certainly on the spending in general, they have done a decent job of reporting it.
Okay.
Thank goodness for talk radio, and thank goodness for Fox News, and thank goodness for all the literally thousands of bloggers, conservative bloggers, and new media folks out there, because those groups are really holding him accountable. And we've got to keep pressing the traditional media. I don't call them mainstream media because we're mainstream, in my view, very much so. But the traditional media, we've got to keep pressing them to report what this administration is doing on spending and taxes. But thankfully, we've got our own media now. And
right.
I'm so glad that we have that mechanism to get the real word of the American people.
Yeah, I refer to them as the lamestream media myself.
Yeah, I never want to give away the term mainstream because I think economic freedom and opportunity and conservative values are as mainstream as apple pie.
I totally agree. Do you favor the fair tax legislation that's been proposed out here?
We want tax reform. Americans for Prosperity has not taken a position favoring the fair tax or the flat tax.
Okay.
But we like. I think both those have merit. So we haven't taken a stand saying, oh no, we prefer fair over flat or flat over fair.
Okay.
But I'll tell you this: we want to change the current economic system. The current tax system. The current tax system is terrible. And it takes too much money and it's too complicated. And the other thing we want to see, before we institute a flat or a fair tax, we want to make sure we repeal constitutionally the income tax. Because if we just do away with it legislatively, then you know how that works. It could always come back in 2 or 3 years. So
right.
we could bring on so whatever happens, I would love to see us repeal constitutionally that income tax, which is just a terrible system of taxation.
I totally agree. A lot of people aren't familiar with the what the government's trying to do right now with the internet takeover. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. The government, this administration, has shown a predisposition to use their regulatory agencies, their unelected bureaucratic agencies, to pass the change they want when Congress won't do it.
Okay.
So, for example, when cap and trade stalled out, which thankfully is stalled right now, although we have a big fight on our hands there, they're using the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, to try to backdoor cap and trade without using Congress. It's the same way with the Internet. The liberals and the left, they literally look at the Internet and they go, wait a minute, we've got to regulate it. We've got to have more regulation. We've got to have more government say over who gets access to all of the infrastructure that's been built by the private sector. We want to control and pick winners and losers when it comes to the Internet. And also, they look at it as an agent of social change. I mean, if the government can have more say in controlling the Internet content and access to it, that gives them enormous new regulatory powers. So they know that left-wing view is never going to get through Congress at this point, even with the liberal Democrat majorities right now.
Right.
So what are they doing? They're using the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which they control right now, to try to pass by regulatory fiat, if you will, sweeping changes that will change the Internet as we know it. I mean, look, the Internet is one of the great success stories in the private economic sector in the last 20 years.
Right.
There has created tens of thousands of jobs, billions in wealth. It makes our lives easier every day. Do we really trust the government to step in and make it better?
No.
I mean, government didn't make Amtrak better when it took over the train.
Right.
The government has Medicare, and we have a $36 trillion unfunded liability when it comes to Medicare. Not for a second. Government has the post office, and it's losing billions every single year with waste and inefficiency.
Right.
So we don't trust the government to step in and, quote, fix the Internet when it's not broken.
Right, exactly. And for a lot of people, what would be the benefit for them to try to control the Internet at this point? Is it just they don't want the free flow of information, stifling competition? What are the benefits of trying to do that?
Several things. Number one, it will give the political class enormous new fundraising powers for all of their campaigns. I mean, think about it. Right now, one of the most heavily regulated areas of the economy are the utilities, our energy grid, right? Utilities. They're very heavily regulated. It's not surprising that utilities are one of the biggest fundraising givers to the political class, because since they're regulated heavily, since the government can kind of control much of what they do, these guys are beholden to the politicians, right?
Right.
So they give us millions and millions every single year. Well, the political class knows that if they basically regulate the Internet, it will be a source of massive new fundraising for them. That's number one. And I know it sounds base and crass, and it is, unfortunately.
I wish they could create jobs like that. I mean, that sounds like they're all they're trying to do.
Doesn't quite work that way.
Right.
A second benefit is if the government can control who has access to T1 lines, the broadband lines, the T1 lines that have been laid across the country at the cost, by the way, of billions to the private sector. If the government can step in and go, well, wait a minute, we now classify this infrastructure, this broadband, this Internet infrastructure, as a government-run utility, which is what they want. That gives them enormous power to direct social change as they see fit. They'll be able to pick winners and losers. They'll be able to say, well, you know what, these groups deserve more access to the Internet. They'll just happen to be liberal groups, by the way. I know you're shocked to hear that. But they'll have the ability and the power to pick winners and losers. And that's not in the interest of individual Americans to have a government picking who has access or doesn't have access to arguably one of the most powerful economic generators of this century.
Wow.
And they'll be able to do that. And then the third area is, I believe they want a fairness doctrine on the Internet. So you've heard of the fairness doctrine as it relates to radio stations and TV stations. So if you're Rush Limbaugh or yourself and you have a show that's pretty successful, they can step in and go, whoa, wait a minute. We believe that since you're part of the public good, the airwaves are really the public good.
Right.
We believe that you should have to present both sides, and we're going to determine when you're not doing that, and we're going to fine you if you don't do that.
Wow.
Imagine them being able to go on to bloggers and other internet groups, news portals, everyone else, and go, you know what, we want to make sure we have a fairness doctrine on the internet. After all, the internet now is a government-run utility, if you will, and we want to create an internet that's better for the public good. When you hear terms like public good, what that means with liberals is we want our friends to have predominance, and we want to pick who the winners and losers are. And I think that's where they want to head with the internet.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty scary right there. What has Americans for Prosperity took a stand on the immigration problems we're having right now in Arizona?
We have not. That's not an issue that we've been involved in.
Okay.
We focus on taxes, spending, and regulatory battles like this internet battle, like the EPA effort. There are a lot of good groups out there that are doing heavy lifting on that issue.
Right.
And we've chosen to try to do what we do best.
Gotcha. And one last thing about the climate tax pledge, the no climate tax pledge. Could you explain
absolutely.
that so we can know more about that, and so people can reach out to their leaders to tell them to make sure they sign that?
Yes, cap and trade is, I would argue, the biggest individual issue threat, along with the health care battle. The liberals want to pass cap and trade, so we're asking members of Congress or candidates for Congress, and at the state level as well, to simply sign a no climate tax pledge that says, I will oppose any and all pieces of legislation that increase climate taxes or energy taxes of any sort, specifically saying, in other words, we're asking these political leaders and candidates to specifically say, I'm not going to support cap and trade or any other energy tax that seeks to in the name of global warming, Al Gore's most cherished hope and dream, to raise taxes and fees on the American people. Over 500 candidates now have signed it, and we want to get to 1,000 candidates across the country this year. So we're asking our activists and supporters to go to these elected officials or the candidates and say, sign the pledge.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I want can you make sure you give everyone the website address one more time, so if they want to become a member, they can enroll and become active?
You bet. It's Americans4prosperity.org. Americans4prosperity.org.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us and let us know what's going on out there. We'll continue to follow, and again, I'll make sure people are getting the message for Americans for Prosperity.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back to the show. That was my interview with Tim Phillips, the president for Americans for Prosperity. I want to take a few minutes here to talk about what we have going on the show later this week. On Thursday, I will have Star Parker on the show. She is a conservative. She has a conservative think tank, Urban Cure, in Washington, D.C., and she's also running for Congress in the Long Beach, California, Compton area. So she's stepping out. We had a great conversation today about what made her want to get involved. Again, people listening in, it's very important that we support conservative candidates throughout the country, regardless if they're in your state or not. We learned from Stupak over Bart Stupak, that my congressman in my area affects your life just as much as if they didn't live in your area. They are still going to be the ones making laws. So if you have family members and people that live in these states, it's very important to get involved and spread the word, because, again, that's what we're up against. The liberals are taking it for granted that people aren't going to get upset and really want changes. But I think that after watching what happened to Arlen Specter, and I'm sure it's going to happen to a few other candidates over the next couple months, that no seat is safe, and that every elected politician is going to have to step up and start doing their job. So I apologize tonight for my throat here. I have my little daughter passing out a cold like it's candy around the house, so I apologize for that. Give me a call, 347-996-3175. I'm interested to hear what your take was on Sean Bielat, the candidate that's running for Congress in the 4th District in Massachusetts against Barney Frank. And also, what did you think about the interview with Tim Phillips? And what do you think you can do to help out? And what we can do to make America, get America back on the right track. So I got a few minutes left here. I want to hear from you. 347-996-3175. Okay, so we got a couple different. Again, on Thursday I have Star Parker on the show. I also have Tim Johnson, who is the president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation. So I'm looking forward to having him on the show soon. Next week we will have a show on conservatives in the Northwest. In the Pacific Northwest, so I'm looking forward to that. We're going to have a couple candidates from Washington State and also a candidate that's running for Congress in Oregon. So, again, I'm reaching out throughout the country, looking for those great candidates that are looking to help improve our country. And if you know of any people out there listening, please feel free to give me recommendations, shoot me emails or Twitter referrals, because that's how I'm getting some of these great guests to come on the show, is from people like yourself that suggest good candidates throughout the country that need to have their voices heard. And again, sometimes the mainstream, what I call the lamestream media, is doing their best job to suppress that information and to promote choices in the candidates that we choose. So I'd like to hear from you, 347-996-3175. I'd like to hear what you think we can do to improve this country. I'd like to hear what you think about the possible fair tax legislation as opposed to the flat tax that Sean's more in favor of. I think the idea of no personal income taxes overall sounds like the best idea to me. Again, I think the point of his discussion was the fact that we should be discussing fair tax and a flat tax, because the current system is truly failing the American people, and we're not getting any bang for our buck. So I think that both of those ideas are something that we need to look at. And again, the idea that we're going to have to cut down on some of these entitlement programs if we ever want to get this country back into a positive money-making situation. Watching what's happened with Greece, watching what's happened with GM, Chrysler, no one is too big to fail, and I think that our government, especially this administration, needs to recognize that we can fail if we don't start righting the ship that we're on now, as far as the big government and the spending with no care. And again, that's the biggest difference between someone that's ran a business or operated in the private sector to someone that's used to floating other people's money around to extend their causes without any repercussions on what it could cost in the future. Because essentially right now we are mortgaging the future of our kids and our grandkids. I will not be affected as much as it will my kids. And I think that we're really going into a slippery slope of where we're leaving the next generation a country that was not as good as it was and it was given to us by our parents or our grandparents. There's been a culture now of, and again, it speaks deeper to our whole society as far as charging things and everything being done on credit that has really affected the way we look at the way our government spends. It's hard for us to tell the government to rein in spending and to not use credit when a good portion of America is doing the same thing. So we really have to look at ourselves, starting with the individual and the responsibilities of the individual, so we can look at what we can do to our country that can be done better. Quite simply, if we're all living off credit and bad debts and things of that nature, it's going to be hard for us to criticize what our government's doing, but understand that the government role affects everyone. And again, when you're talking about indebting yourself, you're only affecting yourself. When we're talking about indebting a country, we're talking about indebting our future, our kids, our grandkids. And I think that's where the buck needs to stop. I don't understand how a lot of these Democrats and liberals don't look at the future and what this spending is doing to our country. And I think that they honestly believe that the government is the do-all to solve all of our problems. You know, there's no call to being the individual, being responsible for oneself, picking oneself up off his bootstraps. Kelly Bradley just wanted to know what was the difference between the fair tax and the flat tax. Flat tax. Flat tax is everyone, and the way Sean explained it to me, everyone pays the same percent on taxes. Fair tax is no personal income taxes. Only based on what you spend, which I think is a great way to look at it. So here you go. The flat tax is where everyone will pay the same percent on taxes. Let's say if it was a flat tax of 10%, or 20%, everyone will pay 20%, regardless of how much you make or how much you spend. So, and the fair tax, which I'm more of a proponent of, is there's no personal income taxes, and you're only paying a tax on what you spend. It might be a 15 to 20% tax on all products, meaning if you go buy a car or anything like that, that's where you would be taxed. And again, we spend so much money on the actual tax code and trying to keep up with the tax code, we would save an immediate amount of money by switching from that. So, I mean, it's just, we have to think outside the box, people. The way we've been doing things just is not working here in America. We're heading into a socialistic state where, again, you're going to be working to pay more taxes than what you're bringing in. I don't want to live in a country where you're paying 60-70% of your taxes just so whenever you do become unemployed, you don't feel the pinch, because everyone is putting so much into this government bureaucracy. And I think that's where, I believe that's where our president uses as the model. And I think that we have to, again, hold all of our leaders accountable and get the right kind of leaders in the government that respect the Constitution, want to follow the Constitution, keep government small, keep them out of an individual's life, because this is what it comes down to. It's all about the individual versus big government. If you believe the big government can bail you out of any situation, and again, this is what they're trying to show. If you believe that they can help you, bail you out of any situation, banks believe that they can go to the government to get bailouts, and these sort of things is not the way this country was intended to be. In a free market system, if a bank or a company is doing bad business and they're running their business into the ground, it should not be the responsibility of government to get involved and to essentially bail them out. When it appears to me a lot of times these banks just didn't want to use their own resources at that time, and they realized that the doors were open and they took advantage of it. And they quickly, a lot of those banks quickly repaid the money because they didn't want the government regulating their pay. And at the end of the day, I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that the government, one mouth, one word, understand that fair tax is more of a consumption tax that implies similar but not exactly out of a national sales tax. I like the idea of no income taxes myself. No problem, Kelly. We only got a few minutes left on the show. I appreciate everybody that's in the chat room checking in with me today. 90 seconds left. I just got my reminder here. So I want to tell everybody to check out the website, conservativeiscool.com. We have a lot of interesting things on there that you can listen in on. The blogs. We have polling where you can go on there and grade the president right now. I think that's the most recent poll. But we have a lot of interesting polling questions. Who would be your favorite candidate for the GOP 2012 presidential election? A lot of different stuff on there. We have a comic relief section where you can go on there and look at all the different postings and YouTube videos that we've posted of all different kinds of politicians. So we don't leave anybody out on that. Again, I want to thank everyone that's listening in. If you get a chance, we'll be on there again on Thursday with Star Parker and the president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, Tim Johnson. So I want to thank everyone that listens and everyone that supports the show. If you can, get a chance, like I said, go to the website, conservativeiscool.com. If you're not following me on Twitter, my Twitter username is WBConservative, or you can always look up Conservative is Cool on Twitter. So thank you for everyone that's listening, and thank you for everyone that's following. I'm going off the air now in 10 seconds, so I want to again thank everyone for your support. Bless you, and I hope you listen in on Thursday. Thanks a lot. Good night, and God bless. Have a good evening.